So this lesson is going to be about noticing figurative language. So figurative language is something that is very common in life, and so it's important for you to know various examples of this and to understand it. So we're going to start with this comic, and we'll explain it a little bit later. So the comic goes, "My girlfriend Pigita broke up with me. Now I'm going to be lonely forever. Oh, Pig, there are plenty of fish in the sea." It's not the same. So we don't exactly know what kind of figurative language this is yet, but we will come back to this later. So like I'm saying, figurative language is very common, and you'll probably hear it and use it 10 to 20 times a day at least. So some common things that you might hear are like, "See you later, alligator," "You are my sunshine," "It took me forever," "That came out of the blue," "She looked crazy as a cat," and plus many more. Honestly, the list goes on and on. So we want to start out by defining some of these examples of figurative language. So first we're going to start with a simile, which is a comparison of two things using like or as. So for an example, "She was quick like a fox." So while the person wasn't exactly as fast as a fox, we understand that comparison and we can work with it. So a metaphor is really similar to a simile, except for it does not use like or as when comparing two objects. So it's just a direct comparison. So instead of saying that building is like a mountain, you're going to say that building is a mountain. We all know the building is not actually a mountain, but because of the building's extreme size, it reminds someone of a mountain. So that's why they say that. So if you notice the little comic in the top right corner, the metaphor and simile characters are there, and the metaphor says, "You're a weasel," and the simile says, "Well, I'm like one." So the metaphor is directly comparing the friend to a weasel by saying, "You are a weasel," and the friend is saying, "No, I'm only like a weasel." So moving on, we're also going to be talking about hyperboles, which is an extreme exaggeration. So the example is, "The book we have to read is 1,000,000 pages long." Now obviously this book is not 1,000,000 pages long, but that exaggeration kind of adds to it. So when we go to alliteration, it's the repetition of the initial consonant sounds. So in my example, it says, "Chester Cheetah chewed a chunk of cheap cheddar cheese." So you can really hear those initial consonant sounds with the ch in front of Chester and cheetah and chewed and so on. Now the cool thing about alliteration is that you don't have to have, 6, 7 words of the same consonant sounds in one sentence, but you can use like 2 or 3 sometimes, like "sunny side up." That's an example of alliteration because we're having that constant S sound. So moving on, there's also personification, which is when you give things that are not human-like qualities. So as an example, "My apple just ran away from me." Now the apple did not actually get up and grow legs and run away, but we understand that somehow the apple got away from the person. So even though the apple didn't actually run away, we understand from the saying that somehow it did get away. So moving on to an idiom is an expression with a different meaning than what the phrase appears to actually mean. So when we're looking back at that comic in the first one where his friend was like, "Oh, don't worry, there are plenty of other fish in the sea," and his friend goes and actually finds the fish, that's not what he meant at all. What he means is that there are other people in this world for you to work things out with. You don't necessarily need to be with just one person. There are other people you could find. So in the example on the slide in front of you, it says, "That guy really rubs me the wrong way." Now no one's actually rubbing anyone any right or wrong way. It's basically saying this person bothers me or annoys me per se. And so that's kind of what an idiom means. It means something different than what it seems to mean on the surface. And finally, we're going to talk about onomatopoeia, which are words that sound like the actions they're referring to. So when we have like bees buzzing and dogs barking, that buzzing and bark, buzz, bark, that's the sound mimics what you see when you read it. So it refers to the same things. So like cockle-doodle-doo or meow and so on. Those words really represent those sounds. So there are many examples of this really everywhere. So when you're watching a Rice Krispie commercial, snap, crackle, and pop, those are all onomatopoeias because that's what it sounds like. The snap, that's what it sounds like. So when we're talking about examples of text, it's very common to find these in books. So when we're looking at The Hobbit, just on page 2, we already come across an example of figurative language. And it reads, "There is little or no magic about them, except the ordinary everyday sort which helps them to disappear quietly and quickly when large stupid folk like you and me come blundering along, making a noise like elephants which they hear a mile off." So people like you and me don't actually make noises like elephants. We're just being compared to being loud like elephants because hobbits themselves are such quiet creatures. So what that is a simile because it is using the word like. Now, in film, if you've ever seen Finding Nemo, when Dory and Marlin come across a school of fish that are kind of playing almost a game of charades with Dory, there's also an example of figurative language. So it goes, "So what are we? Take a guess." Dory says, "Oh, I've seen one of those." And the fish leader says, "I'm a fish with a nose like a sword." So the nose is, it looks like a sword, although it is not a sword. So the fact that it looks like a sword makes it a simile, because again, we're using those words like or as. Now, if you want to look for examples of onomatopoeias, one place to really find these are going to be in comic books, because books, especially with superheroes, really have those pow, punch, bang, sock, and those are all kind of onomatopoeias, except for maybe punch. But so like that sock, if you make a fist and you punch your hand, you can hear that sock kind of sound that comes out. And so those are going to be really intense examples in comics. So this is going to matter to you because figurative language can really affect the way things mean. It can really affect what things mean. So when we're looking at this line right here, when we're looking at our example, we say, "Her lips were as red as roses." So that's giving you something kind of sweet and serene, and, imagining her lips not only red, but, possibly soft and gentle like a rose, right? But when you see the next one, "Her lips were red as fresh blood." Now that creates a more sinister kind of connotation to it that's definitely not as sweet as, being compared to a rose. And same with the examples underneath. "I'm as sick as a dog." We understand that. We've heard that many times before. But when you say, "I'm as sick as a child with leukemia," that kind of adds something unwanted, frankly, to that. It's something that it really changes the whole interpretation of the text and really does affect the meaning. So each example of figurative language is really what's going to change the way a text has. So now that we know a little bit about figurative language, what I want you to do for Monday is, on a notebook paper or some kind of paper you'll have with you, is write down an example of figurative language. Make 5 examples and use each of these words one time. So if there was cat up there, or as mouse, "I'm as quick as a mouse." So say, "I'm as quick as a mouse," and then circle mouse because that's what I'm having you compare something to, or something like that, or use it in some kind of idiom in some sense, and also say what kind of figurative language you are using, just so I know that you understand them. And we'll see you on Monday, and have a great rest of your weekend.